Hooray! The international break is over. But we have to wait until Monday for Newcastle to play. Hello, everyone, and welcome out to the Newcastle United Digest. My name is Adam Snyder, and yes, the international break is over, and we still have a few more days to wait until Newcastle plays on Monday against West Ham. There's been a lot going on this week in the world of the Premier League and Newcastle United. I'll talk about that. I'll also get into my previews for the game and what to watch out for, as well as my starting 11 and score predictions for the game. So let's get right into it, shall we? And we begin the news portion with some Newcastle-related news. On Wednesday evening, the club hosted an event at the Stack, their new venue outside of St. James's Park. The club's board were there to discuss all things related to the current and future plans of Newcastle United. They also had former players Rob Lee, Shola Amiobi, and Papi Cisse to tell amazing stories about their times wearing the black and white shirt. Much like other events that I've attended in person and virtually, there was a lot of talk about the realities of the PSR rules and catching up to the Premier League's commercial juggernauts. The biggest surprise about the Stack event had nothing to do with the stories told by Rob Lee and Shola and Cisse. The biggest surprise about the Stack event was the preference for a new stadium by those in attendance. At one point during the event, Newcastle's new Chief Operating Officer, Brad Miller, took an impromptu straw poll for the proposal, and a large percentage of the crowd raised their hands. This took everybody on stage by surprise, giving them a lot to think about before they make their announcement in January. I've mentioned this on the channel before, but I am welcoming this long, drawn-out approach to the decision. Whatever route is taken will not just define Newcastle United Football Club and their operations, but it also affects the city's landscape for decades, if not centuries to come. I say take as many data points as needed before announcing a decision. Personally, I think a new stadium is the best approach with one major condition. It has to be near the city center. The biggest allure for both Newcastle and away fans alike is the mammoth number of pubs near the stadium and how easily accessible it is from the city center and the train station. If you take the ground away from the city center and move it to the outskirts of town, you're taking away from that matchday experience, and it would destroy something very unique to that experience in Newcastle. There are very few stadiums that are like this in England alone, and there's zero in the Premier League that have the stadium as the absolute focal point of the city. You have to keep the buzz alive in the city center to keep this unique and keep the soul of supporting Newcastle United and keep the soul of Newcastle right there. Right now, 50-something odd Geordies that march up the hill every other week to watch Newcastle play. Add 30,000 to that. March a little bit further up the hill where Leazes Park is right now, and you not only improve the atmosphere of the stadium and the matches themselves, but you also improve the club's bottom line. It's a win-win situation, in my opinion, and I really believe that should be the approach going forward. And in Premier League news, the league met with the clubs on Friday and presented their amended Associated Party Transaction Rules, or APTs for short. The amendments were rushed to a vote after Manchester City successfully sued the league over these rules earlier this year. The loophole Man City exploited was the lack of attention paid to interest-free loans. These loans have been issued by many Premier League clubs owners, including former Newcastle owner Mike Ashley, with little to no intention of collecting on them. They were also not subject to fair market value assessments that other transactions, such as sponsorship agreements with companies directly or indirectly related with their club's owners, or player transactions with clubs in other leagues who share the same owner. The new amendments require a fair market value assessment for these interest-free loans going forward, with some guidelines for existing loans like this currently in place. Prior to today's meeting, Aston Villa's part owner, Nassif Sawiris, sent a letter to the Premier League clubs asking them to consider tabling this vote until Man City's other major legal battle with the Premier League concludes in the first quarter of 2025. This is the 130 charges that they're facing for financial misconduct, and there's been a lot of discussion as to whether or not Man City should remain in the league if they're found guilty on many of these counts. Manchester City has expressed a lot of concern about the legality of these new associated party transaction rules in general, including these amendments brought forth by the Premier League. Suarez is concerned about the already high legal bills that are being incurred by the Premier League to fight Manchester City in court, and Suarez does not want to see yet another stack of legal bills on the Premier League's desk, which ultimately is being paid by the clubs themselves. Despite the vocal objections from NASF and Manchester City, they could not garner enough support to shoot the rule change down. In order to oppose any rules changes, 7 of the 20 clubs must oppose the changes, and just 4 clubs oppose these rule changes: Man City, Aston Villa, Nottingham Forest, and Newcastle. And now let's turn our focus to the match on Monday against West Ham United. There's some things I believe that we need to be looking out for, as well as the squad that will be facing the team on Monday night. One of the things that they really should be looking for is West Ham's tendency to overload the strong side and really collapse down on the ball. There are a couple of situations I noticed in my homework that looked like potential opportunities for goals. One of them was against Ipswich, where they overloaded the front post and left the far post wide open. If you've been supporting the Premier League for a while, you know of the name Roy Delap, who is the legendary long throw specialist that played for Wolves for a long time. His son Liam plays for Ipswich, and he was able to score a goal in this play because he had acres of space to collect the ball, turn, and beat West Ham's keeper short side. And it's not just on set pieces where they're susceptible to this. Spurs were able to do this in the run of play in their 4-1 defeat of West Ham. They worked the ball on their left side, getting the ball to the end line. West Ham collapsed on the ball, leaving acres of space near the top of the 18 for someone in midfield to step up for a wide open shot. In Spurs' case, Destiny Udogie made a brilliant turn, finding Yves Bissouma at the top of the penalty area, and he was able to bury it through traffic. Another thing to look out for is West Ham's frontline form woes. Prior to the Spurs game, the front three of Mohamed Kudus, Mikel Antonio, and Jared Bowen were flying high. They were creating chances left and right. And then Kudus did something really stupid and got sent off against Spurs. And during all of that, he incurred an extra game suspension for appealing the red card. Since that match, they've been on a bit of a drought. They've been blank their last 2 games. And you know that Antonio and Jared Bowen, who is fresh off his first England goal, will be inching to score against Newcastle at St. James's Park. Another thing to look out for is at the beginning of each half. West Ham have both scored and conceded a goal in the first minute of play in their last 6 matches. They were one of the many victims of Brentford's first minute antics when they scored a goal in the first minute or first 2 minutes in like 3 or 4 straight matches. And then they did the same thing to Ipswich the very next week. Depending on when we win the toss, expect Eddie Howe to live up to his MO and hit the team with a quick and heavy attack to start the half whenever we have the kickoff. And now let's roll into my starting 11 and scoring predictions. And on Friday, Eddie Howe talked about the injuries that the squad is facing right now. And one of the first ones was, of course, Callum Wilson. He has not been a part of the squad in any match for this season because of reoccurring injuries and new injuries and recovery from those injuries and new excuses to dog ate my homework, etc., etc. Eddie Howe says he is close to returning and could possibly be featured in the squad on Monday, but we've heard this story before. It sounds like Eddie Howe is a little bit more confident than other times that he's mentioned this status, but I'll believe it when I see it. Including this season, since he signed with the club, Callum Wilson has missed 1/3 of Newcastle's league matches due to injury. Eddie hinted at the possibility of giving him a 1-year extension to his contract. And even if he stays healthy the rest of the year, why take that risk? I mentioned this in our last video about the contracts expiring this year, and I really do think that it's time to move on from Callum Wilson and find a suitable replacement, whether it's on loan, a more youthful understudy to Alexander Isak, something. I just don't see Callum Wilson being the solution anytime after this season. Another player close to returning to the squad is Kieran Trippier, who has been out with a thigh injury, and he is also nearing the end of his injury rehab, and he could also be part of the squad for Monday's match. And Eddie Howe said that he was a little bit ahead of Callum in terms of recovery, meaning that there's a higher probability that we'll see Trippier at least on the bench on Monday. Newcastle will be without Emil Kraft for 6 to 8 weeks with a collarbone break, and he had surgery on that during the international break. Other long-term injuries are still Sven Botman and Jamal Lascelles, and they're both on track to return sometime after the beginning of the year. With Dan Burns' yellow card against Nottingham Forest, that was his 5th of the season, earning him a 1-match ban. Even if Trippier returns to the squad on Monday, Newcastle's low-coverage backline is still down to the absolute bare bones. The rest of the lineup will be pretty easy to predict after that. In goal, of course, it's going to be Nick Pope. I've been saying this every week when I make my predictions. Pope has done nothing wrong to warrant a spot on the bench, so expect him to start. And the back line literally picks itself because what other options do we have? On the right-hand side, you have Tino Livramento. In the middle, you have Fabian Schär and Lloyd Kelly. And on the left-hand side, you have Lewis Hall. Midfield's a little bit tougher given the international break implications, but I really don't see a whole lot of deviation from what's been working the past few matches. You're going to have Bruno Guimaraes, Sean Longstaff, and Joe Linton starting in midfield. And up top, you're going to have Joe Willock on the right side, Alexander Isak in the middle, and Anthony Gordon on the left. I don't see this changing very much after the last 2 or 3 games with it really, really clicking. Expected to do the same thing against West Ham on Monday. In my score predictions, well, I don't see us losing to West Ham this game. They've been a bit of a bogey team in the years past, and I really see this being a 2-0 or 3-1 win to Newcastle under the lights on Monday night, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. And I'm sure all of you are still going through withdrawals from the international break, and on Monday we get to satisfy that fix until, well, after Thanksgiving. And that will do it for this edition of the Newcastle United Digest. And if you've made it this far, be sure to like the video if you've enjoyed what you watch. And if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you get a notification or an alert anytime that I release a new video on the channel. I will be back on Tuesday after the West Ham match, and then I'll probably release one more time prior to the game on Saturday amongst all of the Thanksgiving craziness. So be on the lookout for that. And I look forward to being back and sharing more about Newcastle United with all of you. So until next time, ahoy the lads. Bye for now.